One day where there isn't something happening in the world of Sheffield United. Wouldn't that be a dream? My name is Hal. I'm going to bring Ollie in just a moment. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, you know myself and Ollie and Nick just kind of divide our time up as much as we possibly can to talk to you about what is happening and the news today. And this is all at the moment, although if it breaks while I am speaking, please let me know, that Paul Heckingbottom is going to be relieved of his duties as Sheffield United manager, just over 2 years in charge, appointed on the 25th of November. Those 2 years ago. And he'd previously been interim manager. It does, of course, mean that his first game in charge of Sheffield United was a 5-0 defeat, and his last game in charge of Sheffield United, a 5-0 defeat. But those bookends do not tell the story. I think, and we'll get into it, and I want your thoughts as well, that Paul Heckingbottom deserves a lot of thanks. If you told me when he took charge after Slavisa that we'd be getting out of the Championship, I'd have thought it was only one way, and that would have been down. And after a season, he then took us up. He had huge amounts of injuries to contend with. Those have continued, and maybe there is a common denominator there. A transfer embargo. Started this season, losing his two best players. Things that were out of his hands, and always coped admirably and been, as a public face, extremely well spoken, articulate, and polite. I haven't always agreed with what he said, but I've never at once ever thought, oh, what a rude man. He's always come across extremely well. I think he knows the game really well. And I think whatever he does next, in the future, someone is going to get a very, very good football manager. Ollie, how are you feeling?
Yeah, broadly in line with what you've said, to be honest, mate. I think it's one of them where, you know, I didn't want to see Hecky go. Let me preface that. I did want to see him go, but I wanted it to work out. I like him as a man. He's a nice person. And I did want to see him go potentially with his reputation enhanced. I feel as though the last few weeks have really struggled with that because it has been bad to watch. And I know that some fans have sort of responded to that. But I think the main thing for me is that we do want him to leave with the respect of Sheffield United Football Club. He's done really good things here, and how much credit different fans give him for last season, I personally give him a lot because there was so much going on off the field. He kept that group together. He kept them going and he got us promoted. So I do want to say a huge thank you to Paul Heckingbottom. I think he more than deserves that. There's not many managers in my life who have got us promoted to the Premier League. He is one of them and he did a great job in doing it. But yeah, I think it was time. And I didn't think I was going to be Hal. I'll be honest. I thought when I got up this morning, I was going to see the news that Wilder was going to come in and I wasn't going to be overly enthusiastic. I thought I would say something like, it's a step backwards. Oh, we're just doing it again. And then I actually saw the news and something from the depth of my soul just started humming, Chrissy Wilder and Alan Nell. And it's going. And as the day's gone on, I have got enthused and excited by the idea of having them back. And it is probably nostalgia talking. But yeah, as the day's gone on, I have got excited by the idea, and that's something that I wasn't expecting.
I'm going to share the news that's been filtered through today. This isn't my news. This is news that you will have read, or if you haven't, I'm bringing it to you from other sources. So, for example, Alex Crook has shared that Chris Wilder will be on a 1.5-year contract, 18 months, if you will. He will likely keep Jack Lester, you'd have to assume, because it's also been reported that Stuart McCall will leave with Paul Heckingbottom. Alan Nill returns. Danny Hall says 43-year-old Keith Andrews will join Chris Wilder's coaching setup after Wilder's return to Sheffield United is officially confirmed. Now, Keith Andrews was most recently assistant manager to Stephen Kenny in the Republic of Ireland setup and will be a familiar face to many. He played for Blackburn Rovers. He's got great hair. Matt Prestridge will join Wilder's backroom team, who, of course, was previously at beautiful downtown Bramall Lane. The question, I guess, is Paul Heckingbottom. What's going to happen there? Why have we been hearing so much speculation and rumour? It's been rife since I've been up since 3 a.m. this morning. And you've got to question, where is it all coming from? It isn't me that's leaking it. Ollie, do you think Paul deserves better?
Yes, I do. I don't think it should have come out this way. I don't think it should have come out through the media. If United are going to make an announcement about Paul Heckingbottom's future, it should have been made early this morning. It should be made with certainty. We shouldn't have allowed it to run on. from Heckingbottom's perspective, he will be saying that this has been running on for a couple of months now, where there's been constant rumour, constant conversations. There's always been this threat in the background of him being moved on, Wilder coming in. If it has got to the point that we are making this decision, it should have been made. It shouldn't have been allowed to trickle through the media. It shouldn't have come out via Danny Hall and other people. It should have come straight from the club. And I do think that's a little bit disrespectful to the man who is currently in charge of our football club.
Yeah, in fairness to Danny, he certainly wasn't the first one reporting on this.
In that way, I apologise. This wasn't a whole, oh, well, they're just ruining club, aren't they, by putting stuff out? Not at all. It's not Danny's fault. All I mean is from the club, they should have been more professional, should have handled this professionally in-house and not allowed it to drag on where people are releasing it. Nothing personally against anybody who actually said things about it. I'm currently talking about it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to play devil's advocate as I always do, because the club haven't leaked this. I don't. We hear it. It's the same, actually. I don't want to name a specific journalist, but I think it's the same one who released the information about Slavisa going. And I don't know where they get it from. And maybe the club will think, well, we're not telling anyone. How's it getting out? And we've got things that need sorting out, people's lives. Often people forget there are human beings involved in this with families. Things need to be done. Forms need to be signed. Discussions need to be had. Because I was about to ask you this, and I will now get onto it. Paul Heckingbottom. So what happens to him? Paul may wish to take some time away from the game. He might want to stay with the club. You know, I could see him, because he was with the youth team before, maybe he wants to be a technical director, or maybe not. What do you think will happen to Paul Heckingbottom?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know if you remember when he was signed to a 5-year deal, but there was wording in there about what his role actually was with the club. He wasn't called the first team manager. He had a much broader spectrum in terms of the role that he was being given at Sheffield United Football Club. And maybe that's something that they're working out at the moment. I expect him to just depart the club. I expect him to just leave and not be associated with United in any way going forwards. I think that's probably the cleanest break and the most likely outcome. But it is interesting that he was given this broader role. And what we do about that now, you know, there was talk about directors of football. There were talk about other things that went beyond just management of the first team playing squad. If Heckingbottom goes, what happens to that whole job description that he'd been given? Is that now Wilder as well? Are we saying that somebody will come in to work above Wilder? That would be interesting. And I am kind of interested to hear what the club say. I do wish we'd put out the statement so that I could know specifically what is happening. But I do think in this instance, a clean break is probably the right outcome for everybody involved. Because I think if you're Heckingbottom, I wouldn't want to be him if I'm going back to managing the academy or somewhere else. I think clean break for everybody probably works.
Now, of course, we're just going off on what's being reported today. If you are just joining us, there's been so much speculation from journalists. Of course, if we didn't speak about it, being a Sheffield United fan channel, that would be strange. Let us know your thoughts if you are watching live, and we'll put them up on screen. If you're watching later or listening to this as an audio podcast, you can always let us know your thoughts. Nick reads every single one of them. So Wilder, in my opinion, will be in charge for the Liverpool game. I think this will have been done in time for that. It is strange timing. Ollie, what do you make of the timing of this decision? There will be people that argued if this was going to happen because it's been rumoured for so long, it should have happened earlier because, as you speculated a little before, Paul Heckingbottom's had to deal with the noise.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. And I do think it sort of hints at a lack of organisation behind the scenes in terms of making this decision. We've seen some reports have come out. I only saw them shared on Bladesman. I don't know what the original source was. But that sort of just last week, the Prince was considering it. He was in two minds, but it is what happened on Saturday, which has ultimately pushed his hand, forced this decision and made him make this change. But I do think that if we were making it, why have we still not made it at 5:10 on Monday? You know, it's been 48 hours since the game now. We need proactivity at this stage because the games are coming so quick. Who's done training today? Has Heckingbottom run training today? If Wilder was coming in, should he have been doing it? It's really difficult to see what we're doing in terms of the timing for this one. I think if I was Wilder, though, I'll be honest, I would not want Liverpool at home. I'd be sat there and I'd be thinking, I'll tell you what, Brentford at home on Saturday sounds like a much better homecoming to me than Liverpool at home that I think lots of us are fearing the worst for. So it's interesting timing. I think for an incoming manager, you don't want that to be your first game and you don't want to only have 24 hours before it. But for Heckingbottom, he should have just been given clarity. And to be honest, it should have come on Saturday night.
24 hours, 24 games. Maybe it's all part of the plan. You know what? We've got to start winning. It doesn't matter if it's Liverpool, Manchester City, Brentford. We've got to start picking up points if we've got any hope of staying up. I'm going to read some comments. Fran has said on social media, our best ever manager, Chris Wilder, knows the club, the fans, creates a culture and an identity. 4 points from safety with 24 games to go. There's no one else who can do the job or who would want it. Thoughts?
It's interesting. Look, I think I was one of the people who wasn't on this bandwagon. I don't think that tactically Chris Wilder's what Sheffield United need right now, because I'm not certain that we need to keep going with the same style of play. But she's right. What we will see from this is we will see a very clear style of play. They will say, this is how we are setting up. We always, under Wilder, had defensive organisation. Now, that second season in the Premier League was rubbish. You know, we kept losing every week. We were constantly in basically the same position we're in now. We only lost 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1. We never lost 5-0, 8-0. He will bring defensive organisation, which is something that we desperately need. He will give us a way of playing, a style that we will know what we're trying to do. We will see on the pitch that United have a plan and that we are looking to get forward. So I think there are lots of positives that Chris Wilder brings. And I think that comment's probably right. I'm not sure many other people would be looking at Sheffield United right now and thinking, oh, that's an opportunity. And anybody who was interested might be sat there thinking, well, I fancy this will come up again in the summer because I don't think things are going to get any better. And maybe you want to come in at a completely clean break rather than 6 months before that comes.
Statsman Adam, our very own. Paul Heckingbottom starts and ends with a 5-0 loss. Leicester away when interim manager and Burnley away. But what came in between was 98% of the time magnificent. All the best in the future, Paul, and thank you for what you did for us. So I ask you this, has Paul Heckingbottom suddenly become the problem? Is he a bad manager? I wouldn't say overnight, but over several weeks and months. And it is always the manager, isn't it, Ollie? That is really where the butt stops.
That's football, and you know we can all complain about whether or not we agree with the way that it's done, but the buck stops with the manager. And I think he's not become a bad manager overnight. I do think that even going back to last season, as great a job as he did, some of the flaws we are seeing this season, we probably could have preempted, we could have seen coming by how we'd finished last season. I think he'll get another job. I think he'll get another good job. And I think he deserves another good job. And I would like to see him do well somewhere because I think he deserves that for what he's given to United and for what he did for us last season. But I do think the change gives us a much better opportunity to stay. Well, I don't think we'll stay up anyway, but I think the change gives us a much better opportunity to go down respectfully. Because I do think if we'd not made the change, we would have been going down in disgrace, really. And we couldn't have that. We couldn't keep going the way that we've been going. So I think he has some tactical deficiencies that he'll need to work on. I would question whether or not he needs to get an assistant or a different set of backroom staff to maybe support him on that. I don't think he'll be relying on Mark Hudson for his defensive coaching for too much longer based on some of the experiences we've had this season. But I do wish him the best and I hope he does get a good job out of this one.
Be interesting to see what Alan Neil and Chris Wilder can do. Set pieces back with Alan Neil. Could be quite exciting. We don't have the biggest squad, but Liverpool fans, I've been reading some of their comments and they're now thinking a game that they previously were looking at as a sort of 6-0 walk in the park. Maybe they'll get double figures. They're now a bit more nervous about. And I really do think that the lane will be rocking on Hump Day night. I think that it will be, the first 20 minutes will just be passion. There's one thing Wilder is, he's a motivator. So, we've absolutely seen that before. People have said cheap option. Well, so was Hecky in some eyes, promotion and an FA Cup semi-final. I know that Wilder's out of a job, so it's certainly cheaper than replacing with a manager who's in employment if you were to look at maybe someone further down the leagues or abroad. Also, Ollie, I'm going to ask you about this. It's been thrown at Chris Wilder before as a criticism that his reluctance to blood youth, something that Paul Heckingbottom has been famous for. What are your thoughts on that? And will it hold back some of our exciting youngsters?
Possibly. I do think that there is something in that. And I do think that what this squad maybe needs is an injection of something. But do you want to, this is the question I would ask is, do you want to throw youngsters into this situation United are in right now? It's make or break. Some of them might sort of thrive under that. But I wouldn't want to start my professional career getting battered every week in Premier League. Like, I don't think that putting youngsters in right now would be the best thing for the development of those youngsters. And I think Hecky himself has probably recognised that when you've not seen people like Andre Brooks getting game time, getting anywhere near the pitch at the moment, because he thinks it's probably not worth it for their mentality to come into a team that's losing. The fans might be on their back as much as everybody else is. So I do think that long term, if Wilder, as you reported earlier, has potentially signed an 18-month contract, it more concerns me for next season when you're looking at the development of players like Ollie Arblaster, who's having a fantastic loan. I think next season in the Championship, he should be a key part of our midfield. I think we should really try to get him involved. And so that's where it would concern me. I think for this season, maybe blooding youth would be the wrong thing to do anyway. But next season, it would be a concern for me if he's not going to be willing to develop talented players coming through our academy, which we did see last time.
I got a feeling that Will Asula is Chris Wilder's kind of player. I think he will like his jib and the cut thereof. So we will see. Ollie, what's the realistic hope then for this season?
The realistic hope, if we're being honest with ourselves, is that we see an improvement. I think the best that United can hope for at the moment is improvement. Whether that improvement is enough to keep us in the division, I think it's personally quite unlikely. I look at the other teams down there. I look at the gap that we've got to teams like Bournemouth, who are now starting to pull away from us. I think Everton will pick up. I think so far this season, they've already picked up, 12 points more than us. And so I think looking at the season ahead, they're going to continue picking up points at a pretty consistent rate. But I think what we've got to hope for is that we see a noticed improvement. People have talked about effort. They've talked about passion. They've talked about fight. I want to see all of that. I want to see a Sheffield United team that I can be proud of. Now, that Sheffield United team might still lose more games than they win or draw. That might mean we lose some games 1-0, 2-0. I don't think we'll get battered again. I don't think we're going to be losing 6-0, 7-0, 8-0. I think there's going to be at least something different in that. And that's what I want to see. So I think realistically, we have to expect relegation from the position that we're in. But we should expect now to go down with a fight, with a team that's going to put sort of their heart on their sleeve and really play for Sheffield United. Because I think if they don't play for Sheffield United, Chris Wilder's not going to accept that. He will get into him. We will see publicly that he will get into him. And we know from last time, he's not going to accept these pitiful displays that we've seen the last couple of weeks.
And whether or not that's going to work with a team that's already pretty low on confidence and facing relegation, time will tell. Really, what you're saying then, Ollie, is the test isn't this season. It's the start of next season.
It is. The question that I've got is still about how long Wilder's coming in for. If he is coming in for 18 months, then yes, the judgment for me is what happens in September. I do question whether or not that is the right move. I think obviously we need to see improvement this year. We need to see that things do get better. If, as you say, they're low on confidence, they get called out and they get worse, maybe the end of this season is still the end point of this cycle of Sheffield United. We've got lots of players out of contract in the summer, so we are going to look very different. There is a complete rebuild of Sheffield United's playing squad coming up, and that should happen this summer. And so I suppose for Wilder, this is his audition for 6 months to prove that he's still got it, that what happened at Watford, that what happened at Middlesbrough is an aberration. He's still the man for Sheffield United, and he's the man to lead the rebuild and to take us to our next era, rather than this just being the natural end of the last era for which he deserves all the credit in the world.
Yeah, maybe the reports that are suggesting that 18 months, as we say, these are things that have been touted elsewhere by journalists. Maybe they're true because actually a stopgap manager with the amount of players out of contract wouldn't necessarily make sense. Ollie's just going to bring some of your comments on screen if you're watching on YouTube while I read this from Pete O'Rourke. When we speak of January editions, says there won't be big money available for Chris Wilder to spend in January. The 56-year-old is looking to bring in new faces, but it is believed that he will, to some extent, have his hands tied. Whether that is true or not, time will tell. The squad currently is, in terms of registered players, full. You have a lot of injured players. You wouldn't be able to sell, for example, Tom Davies. Let's say you did want to sell some players. Their value will have decreased. For example, Anel Ahmedhodzic is not performing at the level that I believe we expected. Last season, I think he was a very attractive prospect for a number of Premier League teams. I still believe he is, but just how much has his value been affected, and out of all of the players' values been affected by this really dreadful start to the season. And it cannot be understated. 2 5-0s and an 8-0. That is, and on pace as well to finish with less points than Derby County. It cannot be understated how bad this start is. Sorry, Ollie, to bring it up again. So then Chris Wilder, if he can't sell players to bring players in that he wants, he will have to utilise the squad that he has at his disposal. And Ollie, that could ultimately be just a little bit too much with 24 games to go.
I think that'd be too much for anybody. I think you get like a miracle worker in, and I'm not sure they'd get loads and loads out of this.
Well, it will. I'll say it will be a miracle if we stay up. I'll say it. It will be, and I'd love nothing more.
I will love it. I would love it if he keeps us up. It's one of them situations, though, this where what we'd seen, like these players are not bad football players. You know, as I say, I don't think they're at this level, but we talk about Anel there. Why has Anel gone backwards? Why is he getting worse? Gus Harmer was one of the best players in the Championship last season. Why is he getting worse? Cameron Archer was terrorising defenders. He came to Bramall Lane and he terrorised us. Why has he got worse? Now, I understand that we've stepped up a level and that the opposition are now at a different standard to what we played last season. But we should still see more out of the players that we've got. This squad, whilst it's probably the 18th, 19th best squad in the league, it's not the Derby County worst team that's ever played in the Premier League. It is just not. Fundamentally, even with the injuries, it is not that bad of a squad. And so I do expect to see some improvement. I do expect to see some of these players get their fight back, get a little bit of confidence back. I think it'll be interesting how he works with some of the players that we've mentioned already. Gus Harmer, Anel Ahmedodzic. I think even players like Austin Trusty. These are new to the squad. They're new to the team. They've not worked with Chris Wilder previously, but also they're a different style of player to what he's used previously. He obviously at United worked predominantly with British and Irish players. I think that's the situation, that's the squad, and that's the team that he'd got around him. And so I think that'll be interesting how he gets the best out of those players and whether that man management style that he does so well, is that something he can bring to them. In terms of January, I mean, realistically, we all know the situation with the owner. We all know where Sheffield United are at right now. We're not going to have millions and millions to spend. It will be, if anything, I would expect us to send Luke Thomas back. I think most fans would probably agree that might be the right thing to do so that we can get a better domestic loan in. I think we would probably use that on somebody to come in. Maybe at centre-back, I think we'd expect to see somebody to replace John Egan's role. I think with him being out for such a long time, we would need somebody in there. I wouldn't be shocked to see us go back in for somebody like Kiefer Moore. There was lots of reports that we were in for him over the summer. I think he's a typical Wilder in January type signing. You know, we saw it with James Hansen. We saw it with Gary Medine. I think he'll want a player like that to try and build our attack around as well, just to give us different options. So I don't think we'll do a lot. I think it'll predominantly be loans or frees. I don't think we'll be really going for permanent signings, but I would still expect to see a little bit of room for manoeuvre. And I think we can do that by, like I say, maybe freeing up the space from Luke Thomas. Maybe there might be one or two players who we can get out on loan, or there might be some who actually do have a market, and that'd be a miracle.
Wouldn't be surprised if one or two players leave that we would have at the start of the season said we cannot let them go. Who knows? We'll see if the bids come in January. The Second Tier podcast tweeted this. If Chris Wilder is appointed at Sheffield United, a quarter of Premier League managers will have previously managed Watford. And I think that is probably a good place to close. Ollie, as ever, thank you for sharing your thoughts.
No, always thank you for hosting, Hal. Thank you for having us. I think the main thing that we all need to take away, if there's two things that I could say, it'd be respect for Paul Heckingbottom. I think all United fans should go out now with respect for Paul Heckingbottom. Thank him for the time that he's had with us. I think he has done his best. It's been a disappointing season. It has been at times a disgrace, as we've said over the weekend, but that doesn't take away from the great work he did. And actually how important last season was for us as a football club, because without the money we've got from being in the Premier League this year, we really would be in a mess. So I think he goes out with massive gratitude. I think the second bit is we can start to get a little bit excited. I know that Wilder wasn't everybody's first choice, but he was so utterly brilliant for Sheffield United the last time he was here. It all went wrong in that second season. It all went wrong, if we're honest, as soon as COVID hit. He was never the same man. He was never the same manager for Sheffield United after that. But maybe being in a full Bramall Lane with an energised fan base can bring the best out of Chris Wilder. And so I want to see us go out there on Wednesday night and just cheer for him. It doesn't matter. It's Liverpool at the end of the day. Realistically, he's on a hiding to nothing in this as his first game. But let's not let this disrupt the mood. Let's make sure that on Wednesday and on Saturday against Brentford, we are there supporting this club, supporting the players, supporting the manager, because I think if we can really generate that atmosphere, that will energise Wilder, and that can only make Sheffield United a better team for this season.
Let's get behind the lads. Thank you.